10 years ago, I moved to Los Angeles from a quiet life in Sedona, Arizona, following an even quieter one near Mobile, Alabama. In the months before I left LA, I saw a film that wound up directing my life. The 2005 movie Crash depicts the complexities of prejudice, patriarchy, and shame in the big city, the rural forms of which I was all too familiar from my time in Alabama. But what stayed with me, almost unshakably, was the opening scene. Don Cheadle, playing LAPD Detective Graham Waters, literally crashes onto a crime scene and proclaims, "In LA, nobody touches you. We're always behind this metal and glass." I think we miss that touch so much that we crash into each other, just so we can feel something. Before seeing this movie and my move to LA, I was an ambulance chaser of sorts for various issues: animal abuse, crime, war, poverty, women's rights, racism, international trade policy, etc., etc., etc. I was growing weary of these rabbit holes and was looking for some common or connecting thread. And as it turns out, the scene from Crash and the move to LA were birthing something new inside of me. I began to see conflict as the central core of all issues and couldn't stop seeing conflict itself as us crashing into each other, just to be in contact. Or maybe more precisely, crashing into each other because we were never taught other ways of connecting. So over the last decade, I've been asking myself this question almost nonstop. What are the alternatives to crashing? After studying various forms of conflict resolution and trying like hell to stay conscious in my own conflicts, I began to connect the feeling I have when dancing to the feeling of navigating really difficult times. And then I started wondering, what would it look like to dance rather than crash through conflicts? Now, I love to dance, and if left alone on a dance floor or in a field, I can spin and move like a liberated serpent in the full ecstasy of life. But it's trickier with someone else. Dancing with someone requires some shared rhythm, some shared understanding of how both people are to move, which is why dance forms from ballet to tango have been created, to help humans to flow together. I'm a social scientist and a mediator, practices that both use systems, maps, and rhythms to guide and direct participants, which is so important because both conflict and research are explorations into the unknown, and having some system or form is crucial for navigating murky and often turbulent waves, which is also crucial to being able to venture into deep waters. So while working actively with conflict, both my own and other people in conflict, I found this dance that helps to soften the impact, if not avoid crashing altogether. It's 2 whats, 3 whys, and 2 whats. 7 questions that delve deeply enough underneath the surface to start to bring back real answers. It's 2 steps forward so that we can take 3 steps back and 2 steps forward again. It goes something like this. What did the person actually say or do? What was their intention? Why did they do this? Why did that thing happen? Why did it turn out this way? What could they do differently? What can I or we do differently? I'll give an example of a 12-year-old kid from South Central that I mediated for in a restorative justice conflict. Restorative justice sees crime as a harm that's been done to relationships, rather than a crime that's been committed against a piece of property or even a person. In a restorative justice mediation, victim and offender sit at the same table in order to shed these labels and talk as community members about their shared vulnerabilities. At the mediation table that day, there were 2 police officers representing the community, the kid, let's call him Corey, and his 2 guardians. So what did Corey actually do? Corey was charged with assault and battery, a crime that he had confessed to, but it turns out didn't actually commit, which was not at all surprising given that Corey was 12 and didn't look a day over 7 years old. And you could tell by the way he sat and spoke that Corey was far more used to being yelled at than talked to. His parents, or his guardians rather, ran down a list of grievances that included Corey having left the windows of the house unlocked so that gangsters could come in and rob the place. So what was his intention? The adults in the room talked about these incidents as though they were common adolescent attempts to fit in or be cool, and seemed frustrated and angry at Corey for not having the strength to resist influence. So why did he do these things? It came out that Corey often commits crimes for other people, and he also takes the rap for crimes that others commit. The room was growing very intense, with Corey practically cowering in the corner. So my co-mediator and I sent him out so that we could try to get some ideas from the adults about very concrete things he should be doing differently. So why was all of this happening? The police revealed to us that Corey is caught between two of the worst gang territories in LA. He lives in one and he goes to school in the other. And especially given Corey's size, it's almost bound to happen that Corey's going to be forced into many things, from being the fall guy to the guy that actually pulls the trigger. So why is the gang situation such an issue? Well, the gang scenario in the United States is obviously a very complex and complicated issue, but it is due in no small part to historic and racialized policies such as zoning, redlining, and urban renewal that created ghettos, combined with contemporary policies such as the war on drugs, our privatized prison system, and associated mass incarceration that continue to fabricate environments of poverty and crime. So what could Corey do differently in this situation? It's very tragic to hear the police say there's probably not a whole lot he could be doing differently. Corey's trapped in an environment where extreme crashing is the norm, and his fate, if he stays in that neighborhood, is most likely prison, if not a very early grave. So what can we do differently? A change in consciousness is needed that will impact the entire system. It requires compassion to recognize what is happening and to institute change. In order to create different policies, we should dance these 7 steps of 2 whats, 3 whys, and 2 whats. It's our collective responsibility. We must embody and teach other ways of understanding each other and working through conflict. Because if not, we're sentencing Corey and many other kids like him to lives of violent crashing. Moving beyond the policy implications of this story, I'm sure we can all recognize a similar pattern in our business or personal relationships. Because no matter how good or bad life might be, conflict is always there. Perceived betrayal in the workplace, harsh words or hurt by a friend or loved one. And as I've described this method for dealing with conflict, it sounds pretty easy, right? So why do we continue our habit of crashing instead of learning to dance? One significant factor seems to be shame. On another TEDx stage, Brené Brown gave us the gift of naming and defining shame. It's that insistent and persistent message implanted deeply inside of us by society, religion, family, that says we are somehow fundamentally flawed. Her work suggests to me that shame is the source of a lot of conflict. Because when I'm feeling and focused on my own shame, I can't see another's pain. And seeing and being with other people's pain is crucial to understanding and connecting with each other. So then recognizing shame in ourselves becomes critical to being present with others and really working with rather than colliding into conflict. In my experience, pain and fear have the ability to connect us through empathy. But for so many of us, shame is often hiding right behind fear, and it's sitting right alongside pain. And when shame obscures empathy, we hide and disconnect. And when we aren't connected to each other, we're out of the dance and we crash. Now, when I think of a car accident, the saying comes to mind, don't fall asleep at the wheel. In this scenario, there's an unmoving road and a driver who for one instant stops paying attention and calamity follows. But I'm beginning to think that life is much more like driving a boat than it is like driving a car. I recently rode a large ferry with big windows that I stood in front of, watching as land approached in the distance. As the boat moved forward and the sea moved underneath, I could feel the captain making very small turns of the wheel to keep us on course, almost as though he were dancing with the water. And I had a moment of recognizing this as a very powerful way of navigating life in general, and conflict very specifically. It's staying aware and making very small corrections to keep on the desired course. And if we stay focused on our desire to be in contact, then this dance of 2 whats, 3 whys, and 2 whats can delve deeply enough beneath the surface to provide those small corrections. The dance is essentially 2 steps forward to take 3 steps back in order to come towards each other again. It's in this way that we can begin to redeem our society by questioning and understanding the impact of our policies so that we can stop sentencing our kids to prisons and to graves. And we can begin to redeem ourselves and our relationships, because this compassion and understanding for you might give me a way through my own shame, so that rather than continuing to crash into each other, we can begin to dance. Thank you.